The screen.
Oh, we're started. This is Python's Paradise. This is your host, Greg Gilbert, aka the Python Hyena, straight out of Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada. That province nobody's aware of, but you know what? I got this beautiful fake Toronto background behind me because I dream of Toronto all the time. And I love it, and I'll be there for Frightmare in the Falls with Lisa Langlois this October. So, not that it's important that I'm going to be there, but my guess is definitely going to uh, be important there. But folks, I have a wonderful interview guest today that was introduced, connected to me through Nancy McLaughlin of Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives. And Nancy gave me the rundown on this individual, and I've been looking them up and enjoying what I've been hearing. Folks, I give you what Nancy describes as the one-man show. Mr. Michael Sewell. How do you do, Mike?
Hi, Greg. Great to see you.
Yes, great to see you too, you know. Yeah, oftentimes I've known Nancy since 2016, so there's a lot of times that she's uh thinks that there's somebody out there that I probably should have on the show, and she's a good judge of guests, and she'll direct them my way, and I don't turn people down. You know, I like to hear all sorts of stories, and yours has been a very interesting one. I did want to ask, how did you and Nancy meet?
Um, we we just met. I just through social networking and talking. We had some mutual interests, and so we've got together. We've gotten together a few times, and we've gone to a few events, and we just really connected, and we're able to discuss things. And of course, I we had the acting in the past, screenwriting, those kinds of things. And it was kind of cool to meet one of Jason and Freddie's victims. So
Actually, she sent me, let me see. I've had a number of the Friday the 13th people on here because I grew up with that franchise. I was born in the early 70s, but little Jason Medallion.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I've
what's really
never huh?
what's really funny is the first time I ever met Nancy, it was on a Friday the 13th. So
Oh,
there
well,
you go.
you know what? That is perfect. That is perfect. Yeah, when that particular movie came out, I would have been 14 in 1986 when that came out, you know. But Nancy's been on the show, I'd say 6 or 7 times now. In fact, she interviewed me this year for my 51st birthday, you know. So, yeah. So, yeah, I always loved her red hair, you know, and she was
Yeah,
always, yeah,
striking.
yeah. So
Yeah.
she calls me every now and again, or I call her, and I've never been to California before, so I'm always
Got to get out.
joking. Well, I'm always joking with her about what she finds cold and what we find cold. You
Right.
guys wouldn't last a day here.
Well, I grew up in your kind of weather, and
Hmm.
I'll tell you, it's nice to be away from that those winters. Oh my gosh. So, yeah,
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
it's
Hmm.
sweet as far as the weather goes, but the traffic, forget about it.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, Nancy's been wonderful. Like I said, she called me last night. Actually called me a couple of times about booking you, and I asked her if there's anything that I need to know. Of course, I knew I had some stuff that was sent to me by you, you know, but But anyway, she gave me a little bit of info, and then she was asking because she's got a convention coming up, and she was asking me a bunch of questions about T-shirts and prices and
Sure.
what she should have for photos and this and that. And so I was helping her out with that on the phone. So Nancy is a lovely soul, and I'm happy to call her my friend. And I haven't personally met her yet. But yet it's like we've been in contact since 2016. So you know,
Yeah.
but
Well, she's very personable, very warm, very easy to talk to.
I absolutely love her. She sent people to my way before, and um she's a lovely person to talk to, and she said very kind things about you. So there you go. I got the memo on you.
Okay. Well, that's great.
She
Well,
described you as the one man show. Now, why would she call you that? I'll let
well,
you say it.
all right. I will. I've always been sort of what some people call a unique. People haven't quite known what to do.
Hmm.
I was in New York. I did some work on soaps, some film work, and a lot of theater. Um, but I think my vision was a little off type, perhaps. So I I I wanted to I wanted to say some very positive things, but I also don't like things that are flowery. I come from things that would lean me towards things that are dark, and
Hmm.
that personal experience. But I wanted to say things that weren't usually said by people that were in that realm, and eventually that even led me to ministry. So once I entered ministry, the Christian world was sometimes I didn't know quite how to fit in. I sang a lot. I was at different events, and I'd be up in the pulpit many times. But the things that I wanted to say, I thought, well, these are gut things. These are things that are for people who've maybe come from some pain. So I started writing my own material. And I thought, well, Christianity or evangelical world and the CCM or contemporary Christian music, they didn't have a place for it. There was just no genre for it. But I wrote these hard hitting, kind of dark musicals, really influenced by Soundheim and that kind of thing. And I thought, well, I got to just get it out of my system. I'll do it a time or two. But I wrote the music, I made the props, did the costuming. Um, I I had the tracks made because I couldn't afford a band because these were musicals, and I wrote these musicals that I started doing, and they just took off in certain spheres, but enough that I was able to travel the world for 25, 30 years and to be able to do that full time. And I've gone everywhere. I've gone throughout Europe, throughout Africa. I've done my plays in the bush for people in Sudan in the middle of civil war, in some field where there's cows walking across, and the people there they were just tribal people,
I
and
got I gotta ask,
yeah,
because a lot of times I watch African wildlife videos on here, and
yeah.
I love African wildlife. And not that I want to get off topic, but what did you see for animals?
Oh, well, in Sudan, you see a really cool kind of giraffe because they're black and white. I saw elephants, I saw lions, I saw a lot of vipers, um, I saw a lot of zebras. So yeah, we were in really the bush. People, there were no roads, there was no infrastructure, there's no plumbing, there was no electricity. It was the true bush, and we had to land on dirt fields and just be left there. It was a relief trip, and so that was, well, it was one of the more unique. But also, I've been able to do my play at some huge venues. Here there was something called the Verizon Amphitheater and the Pacific Amphitheater, the Maui Cultural Center. Really, pretty much everywhere. I've done it in prisons. One play 10 years ago, I stopped counting how many times I'd done that play, and that was over 2,000 times. And so that was called Heart in a Box. And it was interesting to see how it translated, even with translators, because I was talking about growing up in a dysfunctional home, because I was using stories of my occult background, and then coming out of that and becoming a Christian, just to see how it always resonated, even in the bush. People who from a completely different culture, we could connect on that human level, and they understood a story of redemption and they loved it. So I've just been surprised at this unique journey. So that's why she would call me a one-man band or a one-man show, because singing, not a great dancer, but some dancing, the acting, the writing, the getting the music produced, writing the songs, and then the marketing. And so as time goes on, you get really tired of the road. So my latest project is called Check Your Head Stories, and I just launched last week. And that is a video YouTube channel and podcast. And so what I'm doing is I've been collecting some really fascinating stories of miracles. And so the tagline is, welcome to Check Your Head Stories, where we consider the bright side of things that could be quite disturbing, with tales of the miraculous, the curious, and the oddly beautiful. And so I want to bring these really beautiful stories of redemption, true miracles, just fascinating things that I've encountered, people who've lived lives of miracles that would be unsuspected heroes, and just bring attention to some of these stories that are all around us, but people don't tell. In the United States, it seems like we're in a postmodern era, but 79% of people believe in miracles and something supernatural. And over 50% of people in the latest polls, and this is just in the past 3 years, say that they personally have experienced a miracle. And so that seems to be so out of sync with what we're seeing from the media. And I thought, there are some underground stories and there's some things that need to be told. And so I want to just champion those things. And I've just been having a great time doing storytelling. One of the people that have really inspired me is a guy named Mr. Ballin. He's a really successful YouTuber, and he just signed a big deal with Amazon. So I kind of saw that format and I thought, well, this is so similar to what I've done in the plays. And so I was inspired by his format. I've changed it quite a bit. I've got my own style and my own editing way of doing things. But yeah, I don't wait around for people to give me the opportunity. I just jump in there and say, okay, I do it. So I script it. Well, I research it. I script it. I do the interviews. It's not an interview show because, most people who have a great story, they're not great storytellers. And but what I do is I help extract that story. If I can maybe take a few clips of them talking, but they usually divert. And so I just write it out, then I tell the story. And sometimes I'll use a little bit of acting and actually kind of not do voices, and not something over the top or slapstick, but I will use a voice or a tone into telling the story. And then I film it, edit it, and then I have just been doing all the research for what they call the SEO and the keywords and how to get everything up on multimedia and different platforms. And so it's a whole new journey. I'm very excited about it. And the stories, they just they deserve people's attention. So I hope I can serve them well.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I grew up in a Christian household, and I believe I actually got my dad's Bible when he passed away in 2022. So, nonetheless, and so I definitely believe. You mentioned that you were involved with the occult growing up, and then you came to Christ. Would you like to talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. My family was from Appalachia, moved to Cleveland, and that was very typical because people tried to escape working coal mines and the poverty that they would go move to what they call the Rust Belt. But my father was not the kind of guy who was interested in working at a factory. So he was always trying to start a business, but he got he had a real alcohol problem,
Mm-hmm.
um, rage problems, but he was also a little bit involved with organized crime. He was what you would call a numbers runner.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother, very sweet woman, but she was the neighborhood fortune teller. And so those were some very dark influences, and those started to take over. I became fascinated with the occult because of my mother's involvement. And also, when you're in a dysfunctional home like that, you look for ways to fix it. And at the time, uh, that kind of spiritism, New Age things were shown as a path to beauty and to wholeness, and they'd use a lot of very flowery and beautiful language, and I thought, yeah, that's it. But at a certain point, um, it just all unraveled. But that's when I had some Christian neighbors who took me to camp, and actually it was theater that gave me my first sense that maybe I wasn't right on, because I went to see a play called Godspell, and it's
Mm-hmm.
based on Matthew. And when they got to the Beatitudes and they talked about love your enemies,
Oh yeah, I struggle with that.
love your enemies. My enemies are my enemies. And that's the first time I ever had a sense like, well, I thought I was just intrinsically good. I thought I was just a good person. I don't love my, I hate my enemies. I want the worst for my enemies. And that's when I started to really start to say, well, maybe I'm not such a good person. Maybe there's something I'm missing. And that was what kind of set me off looking for God. Well, I did become a very strong Christian throughout high school. And afterwards, I thought, well, I'm going to go into the ministry. But I had such horrible experiences in the church, and they really were quite terrible,
Same here.
completely inflammatory. One of the churches it was so odd because, I would look for maybe the outliers, the broken people, and so I was sometimes attracted to uh, churches that were a little odd, because the Baptist church I was going to was so straight laced, and I saw a lot of just meanness and hypocrisy as people tried to get power. It's just like
Yep.
this game. So I would go and explore other churches. Well, I got involved with some things very culty, but I never really committed to them. But I saw them over and over, and one of them was so bizarre. This guy, he was a self-proclaimed prophet, and he had built up this cult following, and a friend was going to it, and I went a few times, but it was just traumatic for me because the meetings were so weird. And then I came to find out that the guy actually he had a benefactor, a rich widow who was just paying for everything and giving his building. I mean, very wealthy. Well, he murdered her, and I mean, so gruesome. But he he disposed of the body in a freezer, and the FBI got involved, and all the people that were going to this weird little cult thing, they all had to be witnesses. Oh my gosh! And then thought, oh man, the Christian world is so weird, and I just kept seeing people fight over different things that seemed irrelevant. And then also, I was a young man, and like, well, I don't get to go have any of the fun. So at a certain point, said, I'm not a Christian anymore. And that's when I moved to New York City. I was pursuing my career and I got involved with a lot of New Age stuff. And at first I thought I was just innocent and I was finally being sound-minded. I guess what they would call today, I was a deconstructionist, but I was doing it back in the 80s. And so 80s and 90s. But that just took me in deeply into the occult. I had a spirit guide. I was dabbling in all kinds of different occult practices, but that led me to complete depression. And I had I'd had a plan that if I couldn't get past all of this horrible pain, that I was going to take my own life. And I was very serious about it. And at the time, a lot of prescription drugs were very popular, and so everybody I knew was on something. So when I'd come and visit you, I'd go to your bathroom, go, can I use your bathroom? I'd go through the medicine chest and medicine cabinet. If I found some kind of pills, I just pill for a few. And I had a bag, I called it my plan B, my exit bag. And over about 2.5 years, I filled this huge plastic bag with all these pills. And I said, okay, by a certain date, if I do not feel relief, then I am going to just end my life. I'm going to take all these pills. And I had a certain date planned out. And the spirit guide that at first seemed so beautiful turned on me in my out of body experiences. It just got weirder and weirder, and this spirit that I thought was benevolent became just destructive and hateful, and I realized this is just demonic. Now, I believe I was a Christian through this. I believe I belonged to God, so I don't think I could have been possessed. I believe I had a protection, but also God was reaching out to me. I don't know how it happened, but I had probably one of the only Christian agents in New York City. And she would share with me. And then when I would go for auditions and I'd had to learn choreography, one of the guys from Dreamgirls, he was my choreographer. He'd teach me the dances. And it turns out while Dreamgirls was on Broadway, a lot of the people that were on the cast became Christians. And a little church started from the cast of Dreamgirls. And they met in a rehearsal studio up in Broadway. So I was just like, I can't get away from this stuff, even in New York City, even in this community, in the arts community. And I was, one of those East Village kind of freaks and club kids, but it was still around me. And so on that fateful day, when I had decided I'm taking my life, God just kept sending me messengers, old friends just coming out of the blue. And I just realized on that night, okay, God, if you're really there, then I'm going to give you my life. If not, then I'm going to end it. And just flooded with light and flooded with just freedom and all this pain, it just lifted. So that set me on a whole new path. I was still an artist, but now I wanted to be in ministry again. And so I didn't know the two would blend. And so that's how I started doing the ministry and doing the art that I do. And again, it's still, it's still a little offbeat, but I think most of us are a little offbeat. I think most of us have had the experience of true pain, of those dysfunctions, of that darkness. And so it doesn't do any good to pretend like that darkness doesn't exist, because it does. But if you can just know that the darkness doesn't have to overwhelm, and God sees that darkness, and that's why the cross happened. The cross is very dark. The Bible is full of these dark stories. It doesn't pretend like everything's sugary sweet and it's just good, wonderful people. It is it's as real as can be, as honest as can be. I hear the media there's always been controversy about it. It's always been a rejected message. And yet my experience with God and my spiritual journey and the light that I have, I believe in it completely and fully. And I don't see people who disagree with me as enemies. I just see them as people God really deeply loves and wants to reach into their life and give them salvation and freedom and healing.
Here's
So
my miracle. This is Skittles. Skittles is dysfunctional. He's my buddy.
yeah,
He gets over here, I always stick him on camera.
well,
Yeah, huh? Yeah, I was gonna say, I too come from the Christian household and whatnot, and I haven't gone to church in ages, because I took issue with some of the hypocrisy that's going on,
yes,
and
yes.
yep, and I remember it was I think it was 2005 or 2006, somewhere in there. I was going to a church, and I have a couple friends here, and we'd go to the nightclubs, and we knew the DJs at the nightclubs and whatnot, and we'd go there and listen to the music and mingle. Um, we were never up to any shenanigans or anything like that. We weren't picking up women or getting drunk. Actually, none of us drank. It was just a hangout. And I was at church one Sunday, and somebody I knew come up and was apparently sent to talk to me about this.
Hmm?
And I come to find out it was a youth pastor that didn't have the guts to say it to me. And needless to say, I wasn't long letting the new youth pastor know that I didn't appreciate his views on my life. And quite frankly, he was in no position to be judging me. And I found this a lot. And where I review movies and whatnot, I also got tired of this whole notion of it doesn't matter how well done a movie is as long as it's got God's word. And I'm like, hell yeah, it matters how well the movie is done. Because
Yeah,
I'm going to tell you, there's a lot of these pure flicks movies that I think are pretty trashy. I saw nothing about stuff like Fireproof or Unplanned or anything like that I find that I want to sit through. What's funny is that, and they preach against R-rated films, and yet The Passion of the Christ was nearly an X rating.
yes, exactly.
And I
Yes.
could wear the Passion of the Christ T-shirt at one of those horror film cons and blend right in, because you want to talk about a film that had a lot of gore in it. And I love that film, but there's a big difference between how that film was shot and how a lot of these other ones are shot. And I hate that argument as, well, it doesn't matter how well it's made as long as it brings people to Christ. I'm like, who's coming to Christ through these movies? It's like, well, none of my friends would want to be drugged to one of these movies. They would consider it an insult and a waste of time, and personally, so would I.
Right. Yeah, yeah. I agree. I have a experience. I did make a Christian film for the Christian film market, and I will tell you, as a filmmaker,
Hmm.
you experience pressures because, first of all, if you're going to get any funding, people are going to judge the movie as if it were a church service. And imagine it. I mean, people are so icky at church services and criticize so much what's going on. Imagine if they're the funder and it's a movie. So, oh, they want input, they want final say, and then you have to face your audience, and this is where I think maybe Christians can be the most brutal is in their opinion of art. They
Yep.
judge art as if it were a Bible study or they look for nuances that are a message or an agenda. They oh goodness, they just, if they don't like subject matter, they can just go off. And so one of the things that you have to do is get past like the Dove and I forget. There's different censor groups.
The one I hate the most is Movie Guide. I can't stand those people. They don't like me, and they've been warned if they ever do a sermon in and around me, I'm going to take the stage.
Okay.
And I'm going to put the run to them. That's what's going to happen. These are the kind of people, they'll give 4 stars to something like Fireproof. But yeah, if something's an R rating or something like that, or an X rating, they'll lessen the star ratings. One of the idiots from that group actually said, "How can a film be 4 stars if it's got violence and profanity in it?" And I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" I said, "What makes a film 4 stars if they're pushing an agenda?" And again, the guys that made Fireproof, the Kendricks brothers, I guess they make films for Christians, and I'm like, yeah. Well, what did Jesus say to his disciples? What did he say? He said, "I'll go make you fishers of men." The Kendrick brothers kind of reminds me of people whose idea of fisher of men is going into a pet store and casting their hooks into a tank it's already got fish that have been caught. They're preaching to the choir.
Well, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think they provide something that is inspirational to many people, and they have a product and a vision and a specific calling. So I wouldn't fault them at all for doing what they do. But there's room for other things. That doesn't have to be what people who believe get behind. And here's the thing. This is what I saw. Some of the people that were most vocal or critical of the movie, well, even the movie I made, okay, I don't want to get, I can see you're a little inflamed about this, and I don't want to push you further down the line, but this is the kind of thing that bothered me a little bit. They wouldn't give a recommendation to my movie because there's a scene where somebody wakes up in the middle of the night with a phone call to hear that their father has died. He wakes up and his wife is in the background, and she gets up, and for, I mean, just a frame or two, you just see a little bit of cleavage. Nothing, I mean, it was just a little more cleavage than maybe they were comfortable with. But they said, well, we will not give our approval because there's cleavage that happens in this movie. It's just like, oh, and you had to be looking for it. No.
Here's a question. Here's a question. Do they approve the Passion of the Christ with all of the brutal violence in it?
Exactly. And then also, once my distributor paid their fee, they gave it a pass. So
wow.
I was, okay, I see. So here's the thing. Not everybody that's in the Christian business is doing things from the Spirit. Many times they're doing things, they're just checking boxes. They're just saying, well, this. And that's the paradigm. You can't, art doesn't get judged or understood on that level. And so, and then some of the people that say, oh, because there's a bad Christian in my movie. They learn a lesson, they have an arc. Well, because I had a bad Christian, they said there's an anti-Christian sentiment in this movie. Like, what? All the Christians in a Christian movie need to be absolutely perfect and wonderful? No, Christians can be villains. And
well, look at God's Not Dead. It's like they present all the Christians as being these men on white horses, so to speak. But I mean, you got somebody from a different religion assaults his daughter and kicks her out of the house whenever she becomes a Christian, and this is how they're portraying people outside their faith, and I'm like, I think that's dangerous.
Well, yeah, I mean, those things do happen, but they
They
don't
do.
really happen that much in our culture. I'd say over in other countries, that's more of a reality. But that is a problem, because a lot of pastors that I know, they aren't perfect, and they have real struggles. And then we've kind of set it up that people need to be above reproach. But then I I don't know anybody who's completely above reproach. There's there's just a weakness and a sin in us. And I think if we were to not have so much shame and fear about that, and just say that exists, let's move past it. If we were able to give that grace and to recognize our sin, and just and not say, okay, now you're one of the dirty outcasts. I think there comes a point where people can become outcasts to the church, but that point has to.
I'm an outcast of the church, and I'm proud of it.
Well, no, what I mean is not somebody who's been mistreated. I think there are people who do become reprobate. They leave their faith and they harden their heart. That's one.
I haven't left my faith.
Then
I
you're
just left the church.
right. So there's a wound there, and I understand it. And
Hmm.
and I and I and I, I'll be honest with you. I will, Greg. Maybe this is too personal. I will pray for you because you have something to offer and to add. And I hope that you can find the strength to know, like, it doesn't matter about their judgments or about their gains. Somehow insulate yourself, but if you could be there to be that voice, to just say, hey, no, we're gonna be real, and I'm gonna come here and we're gonna fellowship, and and maybe you could learn something from me. And as soon as you cross the line, and I'm gonna just say, no, I'm not gonna play that game with you. Um, I I don't know how I've been able to do it, but somehow I've been able to get past that. Now I I just am who I am, and I'm just real, and I don't try to hide my life.
Yeah, good friends like Nancy. Nancy is somebody I have a lot of talk to about faith. I
Yeah,
wanted to ask you, what film did you make?
it was called Wheel of Knowing. Now
Okay.
it was very low budget.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I worked on it for 3 years. I it's so, film is the most collaborative um, art form I can think of, and it
Mm-hmm.
gets reinforced every step of the way. Even distributors can reimagine your film. I lost control of it, and it's not exactly what I wanted it to be. But I did complete it and did get it distributed, and it did make its budget back. But 3 years of my life, the hardest work I ever did, and it wasn't in the red. And people tell me that's a success. I'm like, well, oh man, because many movies and many independent films, especially Christian films, don't ever make their budget back, and they're usually in the red. And some of those are popular films. Now the Kendrick brothers have made bank, but they were in the right place at the right time at the right meeting, and they've been able to do quite well. And also the way they do their budgets, they don't pay their actors, which I I just don't understand that. Everybody else gets paid, but that's part of their plan, as far as I understand. That's what I've been told, and I think that's why Kirk Cameron, he had to do a special thing in order to even be in one of their shows. But
I
they've
don't
got.
know. Kurt Cameron's Saving Christmas. I'm so delighted that I'm one of the people that helped that thing get the Razzie for Worst Picture.
Oh my, yeah. I honestly, Greg, I haven't seen many of these movies that you're talking
You're
about.
not missing much.
Uh, I I have many friends who've loved them. They just think they're just great. They just have never. I've never had the opportunity. Uh, I haven't watched many of them at all.
I did love The Passion, though. The Passion of the Christ, I have that here. I
Yeah,
think that Mel Gibson did that so well in the way he shot it, but I love the fact that it was an R-rated Christian movie, you know? I could wear that at one of these horror film cons and it would blend right in because it's like it's it could go on the cover of Fangoria magazine and be rated home, you know? I love that about it, but it's a beautifully shot movie, and I have a lot of admiration for The Passion. But that film was also artistically well done as well as have its message, you know?
right.
Mm,
Yes,
Yeah.
it's it's a tough one. It's very disturbing, but certainly well done. Absolutely.
mm-hmm.
So yeah, I agree with you. Um, this is this is a tough issue because I can see many points of view, and I can see how if you're going to try and make films for a Christian market or a faith-based film, then it's almost like they force you into a certain mold. And if you have a Christian film that's for the mainstream market, then it's just not going to get made.
A lot of times it depends on how you make it. Like a film like Dead Man Walking, for example, I consider a Christian movie, but it was also aimed at a mainstream audience as well, you know? You
Right,
can do it, you
right.
know, but there's a way to do it and a way to do it without turning off that. Yeah,
And how many years ago was that? It doesn't
that
happen.
yeah, but
Uh,
they're out there. I have seen them, but
right.
yeah. I was
So
gonna
so I just that's why like that's why this new platform is exciting to me. You just skirt the issue, just put it out there. I don't understand the algorithm or what people will be drawn to, but at least I can get my voice heard. And you would probably like this one. I don't think the issue or the episode I dropped on Friday. There's a book. Are you familiar with Scott Peck? You probably know that name, Dr.
I
Scott Peck.
do I do know that name, yes.
Yeah, he wrote The Road Less Traveled, which is it's one of the best-selling books of all time, over 10 million copies. Um, well, after he wrote that book, he went on a search to understand human evil. Now, he grew up with a kind of a Christian thing, but at the time he was sort of a Buddhist and an Islamic mystic. That was his faith kind of attachment. It was sort of like he made up his own religion from a couple other things, but he decided, as a therapist, as a psychiatrist, there is human evil, and he said, I know that in my peers they don't even want to say there's evil. There's just dysfunction and
Mm-hmm.
but he said no, there's evil. There's a certain point where somebody is no longer just a victim, they cross over into evil. And he said, and he said, my peers, he said, in their unguarded moments, they would have to admit that's true. But he said, but nobody's ever done a clinical study. So he decided to do a case study of different people that he considered evil. And he wrote a book called People the Lie. And while he was writing this book and doing the case studies, he actually ended up going into the realm of becoming an exorcist and became a Christian. And so it's a fascinating book. It's a fascinating study. And so what I did for a couple episodes of Check Your Head Stories is I told some of his case studies. And the one that I dropped on Monday, it's so disturbing. It's about some parents that they look like just fine, upstanding people, but they've crossed over into evil.
Mm-hmm.
And so they had a son. They had two sons, and one of them committed suicide. So I'm going to give away I'm going to give away my lead here. But this is just one of the stories. But their second son, at first, he seemed like he was doing all right. He seemed like he was adjusting throughout the summer, because the first brother, Stuart, killed himself in June. So through the summer, he seemed like he was doing okay, just grieving. But once September came, he started to fall apart. His grades fell apart. His behavior changed. He became inward. He became depressed. It just got worse and worse. And so then he, at a certain point, once the new year hit, he stole a car. He was just 14 years old, stole a car by himself and crashed it. And he'd never acted out, became antisocial before. So because he had a good record, they said, well, we'll let you off, but you have to be hospitalized. So Dr. Peck becomes his therapist. He meets with the boy, and the boy's, he's just got sores, he's scratching, he's withdrawn, he hardly answers. And so he can't get the boy to talk about anything. He said, well, how about your parents? He goes, yeah, they're nice to me, they're good to me, they drive me places. He said, well, so do you have any problems? He goes, well, sometimes I'm mean to them. He goes, what do you mean? Because I hurt them. I said, well, how do you hurt them? He goes, I don't know, I just hurt them. And what do they do when you hurt them? Because they yell. He said, well, what kind of thing have you done to hurt him? He said, well, I stole a car, that hurts him. He said, well, is that why you stole the car? And the kid just says, I don't know. And then he starts scratching more. So the doctor says, okay, I'm pressed on something. Let's back up. So he tries to talk about something pleasant. He goes, well, hey, we just had Christmas. What'd you get for Christmas? Did your parents get you anything? Yeah, not much. So, well, what did they give you? He said, a gun. He said, they gave you a gun. He said, well, that's interesting. Do you ask for a gun? He goes, no. He says, well, didn't your brother kill himself with a gun? He said, yeah, he shot himself. He said, well, okay. He said it was a .22 rifle. He said, well, what did your parents gave you a gun? He said, yeah. So what kind of gun did they give you? He said, .22 rifle. He said, they gave you the same kind of gun your brother killed himself with? He said, no. He said, well, I thought it was a .22. He goes, it wasn't the same kind of gun. It was the gun.
Wow.
Doctor's just like, what? So he decides he needs to help this boy. And when he meets with the parents, they just divert everything. They won't admit that they were at fault at all. And when they said, well, why did you give him this gun? He said, well, what, are you anti-gun nut? He goes, it's a great gun. He said, but it's the gun his brother killed himself with. Did you think that maybe you were sending the message that your other son should do the same thing? He goes, we weren't sending that message. And they just would not admit at all that what they had done was in any way wrong. They just kept talking about money and convenience. And he said these people had become so deceived they couldn't even see that they had stepped into evil. They said it happens just like that. You just start making a series of decisions and hardening your heart and blinding yourself until you end up with this narcissism that takes you into evil. And then the second story I tell in this episode is the story of actually meeting a demonic spirit that he believes to be Satan, and what that demon said. It's chilling stuff, and it's really dark, but it comes to a great conclusion. And he says, the way that we can overcome or solve the problem of human evil is to recognize that it's a series of lies, and to overcome the fear that those lies that transcend the fear that those lies bring, and turn to the risen Christ. And so I thought, this is just such great material, and it's helped me understand so much about the things that I've seen in life, human behavior, the choices that people have made. It is beguiling when you meet someone who's become evil, and they don't necessarily look evil. They can be charismatic and wonderful, but but you know that there's something missing. And it's not that like a psychopath. It's not that thing where perhaps it's a mental illness. It is a series of decisions, and then the loss of any accountability or to even recognize that what they're doing is wrong. And so that I think that kind of message being out there, I think that'll be really helpful to people, and to recognize what could happen in their own lives, and then also what they're dealing with in other people, and then where to turn to find the answer to help heal that, or to stand against it and not be crushed or hurt by it anymore. So
I really like the 911 one that you sent me.
oh yeah, John
Yeah,
Marito. You know,
yeah.
that story was covered even by Oprah. She had their own station, and they
Hmm.
had miracle detectives, and they covered that story, and they went and interviewed John. But what's really weird is they did it in 4 parts. 2 of the episodes where the miracles are really discussed are missing. So I had to scour the internet and put together a puzzle, and it was not easy, of
Hmm.
all the different things that happened that day, all the pieces of the miracle. And I just thought, this story is about to be lost. And it's so brilliant. It's so inspiring, so beautiful. I just want to, at least somewhere on the internet, preserve it and tell that story.
So
Um,
would you plug your YouTube on here, you know?
well, yeah, sure. Of course, I'd love to, because it ain't easy to get started with YouTube. And
Well,
uh,
I'm going on a number of platforms because like I know YouTube pulled one of my interviews because of misinformation on health, blah blah blah. And it was just a casual conversation about the
yes.
jab, and it wasn't even us saying whether you should or shouldn't get it. It was just me asking what it was like where they were dealing with the situation compared to where I was a little distraught that I got a strike against my channel over that. So I'm putting my stuff up on Anchor and Spotify. I'm going to go put my stuff on Rumble and Locals eventually,
Yes.
because I'm to the point where this whole censorship thing going on, it's like yeah, YouTube is starting to worry me on it.
Oh, and they just keep saying it's the algorithm, and who knows? They keep it mysterious.
Mhm.
Um, so I am very concerned about it too. The whole thing of censorship, it's going down a path that once you give up that kind of freedom, and once you start to accept that, it doesn't come back. So it's really horrible. And as somebody who has always been an artist, um, these these things are my core. I hate them. I hate this censorship. I hate the fact that there can't be free thought, because people are going to think for themselves no matter what. And
Yep.
so I, I just, yeah, the whole way of thinking now is, it's very dark, and I hope it is just a passing trend. I hope it's something we laugh about. It's like, oh, remember the early 2020s? I hope it.
Well, thank goodness there's other platforms a person can go to, though. That is a good news. But what is the name of your YouTube?
Check Your Head Stories.
Check Your
Um,
Head Stories.
it is on Rumble. It just hit Spotify this week,
Mhm.
um, as a podcast. Um, it's also a YouTube podcast, a video podcast. I don't
Mhm.
understand in the video podcasts and videos. Not quite sure, but yes, it's Check Your Head Stories. It's all. I also have website, checkyourheadstories.com, Facebook page, Check Your Head
Mhm.
Story. Um, I have. It'll be on Apple probably later this week. It takes a little while for Apple to get the approval, but I've got 4 episodes up. I've got a bunch of shorts, but I hope people that will support it and find something interesting, because there's just amazing stories coming up. They're
I
really,
need to subscribe to it, and I didn't know what it was called because Nancy McLaughlin asked me last night what the name of your, because she wanted to subscribe, and I was like,
I know she can't
yeah.
subscribe. I'm like, I don't, you just do it. I don't know. You just press the subscribe button.
No, but
She's
she didn't know what, like, I found your songs and stuff like that on there, but I
okay.
couldn't find where you had your story. So check your head. Okay, now I know.
And it has
Let
particular stories because otherwise you're going to go to the Red Hot Chili Peppers song, and so because you know they have
Yeah,
that head, but it's check your head stories. So
let's talk about some of your music because Nancy turned me on to that. I'm going to tell you, there's a song on there I listened to more than once, and I really liked it. It's called "Gotta Tell the Story."
yes.
That is an awesome song, man.
Oh, thank you. I don't know. I've never thought of myself as a great songwriter. I wrote the songs for the plays.
Uh-huh.
Um, uh, so I don't. My songs are okay, and I enjoy singing them, and I'm glad they resonate with people. Some of them really do.
Oh, that one was nice and uplifting, and you had the background singers and stuff. Like I said, I listened to it more than once. I was like, that one that especially enjoyed that one, you
Well,
know?
I had a great arranger, a guy named Sean Tubbs. He
Mm-hmm.
is he was he's kind of a genius. He's doing something. I think he got a really big gig, but he was a major guy for Vineyard Music for years, and he was an arranger and a songwriter, and he's just this beautiful, sensitive artist. And then the guy who produced it was a guy named Stan Endicott, and Stan is a major guy in Christian music. I don't know if you probably 20 years back there was something called Promise Keepers, and he was in charge of the music for all that. He put together the choirs, and so he hooked me up with a lot of people from Gospel Music Workshop of America. I love that kind of music because when I lived in New York, I used to go to the Brooklyn Tabernacle, which has this great multi-ethnic choir. And so I loved it because that was one church where we're all together. You know, a lot of times churches separate
Hmm.
church, black church, white church, you know, it's just like, so, but there we were all together, and I love that place, and I love the community. And I just fell in love with the music because it just touched my heart so much. So when I was writing, I was trying to evoke that experience and that kind of sound. So, well, thank you for liking the music. I haven't done music for years. It's kind of a young man's game. It's a very expensive art form, but yeah, well, who knows? Maybe I'll do a little more music. I still sing every week, still lead worship, but
Well, now that I know that your other thing is check your heart or check your head stories, because
yeah,
I listen to these while I'm at work. I work as a cleaner. And I
okay,
listen to them while I'm cleaning, because I do the overnights, and I'm like, and I was trying to find them because that's when I listened to the one you talked about, the kid and the gun. That one I heard, and I
yes,
heard the 911 one. I was trying to find them last night. I couldn't find them, so I didn't know it was called Check Your Head Stories. So I'm going to listen to more of your episodes. But I definitely found your music. That I did find. Yeah,
great. Thank you,
yeah.
Greg.
Well, you're a good storyteller, and you really allow the listener to uh, get a sense of either the excitement or the dread or whatever it is that's happening
Yeah,
within the situation. And I think that works. And you also make people think about things, like the idea of the parents giving the kid the gun, the actual gun that his brother used to kill himself. That's just like wow.
great. Yes, yes. It's a shocking thing. Um, yeah, and then one of my favorite stories. I think it's hard to resonate because it comes from a different culture, but the one about rescuing Rebecca. See, I was on a relief trip in
Hmm.
1999,
Uh-huh.
the end of 8, and met a girl over there who a few weeks before her family had been massacred. and they were running from the attack in their village, and her mother was in labor. And while they were running, her mother's water broke and she falls to her knees. And they go to this riverbed that had dried up. It dries up in the dry season, and they hid under with a bunch of little kids. I think there were 14 of them, and they hid under these roots, thinking they had missed the attack, but they had actually been targeted because her father was a tribal leader. And so they found them, and most of her family was slaughtered, including her mother, who's pushing to have a baby, and they shoot her in the stomach. The baby dies, the mother bleeds out, but it takes hours and hours. Her infant sister was shot and killed. Her little brother, who was just a toddler, they killed him, and they told her to run. So she started to run, and they shot her in the tibia, and she just laid there thinking she's going to die. She crawls to her mother, and finally she's found. She's taken out. She survives, but they think they're going to have to amputate her leg. And so we met her at the time when they were getting ready to cut up her leg, but they had to get her to a place where there was medical, because like in the middle of the bush, she would certainly die, but they had to fly her somewhere to get her leg taken care of. And so the pastor who we're with, he's got a relief organization called Safe Harbor International. And so he decided he was going to get involved. They sent her, took the x-ray, and said, okay, we got to put you on antibiotics. They gave her the surgery date. They sent her back to the missionary house, and she just kept walking around. They said, well, you got to stay seated. And they didn't understand that. They get phone calls back in the United States. She won't stay seated. And they go, we'll take away her crutch. Because she doesn't have a crutch. She just keeps walking around. Well, she can't walk around. There's just like jelly in her legs. She can't support herself. But she's doing it. They took her back, and the 4 inches of bone had just appeared. And she was miraculously healed. So that was the first miracle. She came and grew up here in Southern California. Pastor Gary adopted her. And he was on one of the flights coming back from one of his relief trips, and he met a congressman. He and Rebecca were invited to go and testify in front of Congress about what had happened. It moved Congress to get involved with negotiations and diplomatic relations in Sudan. So a several decade long civil war was ended due to the fact that they'd heard that story and one other story, and because of those relations. And even Pastor Gary was in on that. And then 5 years later, the South Sudan, the people in the southern region of Sudan, were able to vote whether they wanted to succeed. And the new nation of South Sudan, the newest nation in the whole earth, now exists. And it's just in the past few years, now exists due in large the fact of Rebecca's story and one other story. So it's just like this miracle just touched the whole world, changed the world map. These are wonderful stories. I hope I can sort them well, and I hope that people will become aware of them. I think they're important. I think they're good. So I'm excited about them. There's more, but
absolutely. You gonna do anything with Nancy? After all, she's got a film background.
She does. We're going to talk about it. She's got a few stories. I mean, I'm getting a lot of people saying, I got this story. So it takes, I got to really spend time developing all of them. And so it's on the ledger to let's have the interview. Let's see what we could pull together. And I wouldn't be opposed to doing something with Nancy. That sounds like a good idea. So yeah, we'll see.
I love the red hair. I love the red hair.
Yeah.
You mentioned being to Africa and whatnot. Out of all the places you've been in the world, what place resonates with you the most?
I would say, well, Africa was the most moving, but it was so far out of my experience that when I came back, I almost had to go into denial that even exists because it was so unfamiliar. But one of the places where I had one of my best experiences was in Subotica of what used to be called Yugoslavia.
Mhm.
Um, they have a cultural festival there once a year, and one year I was there, and that's when people from all over Eastern Europe gather in Subotica, and they put on plays and different cultural events, and it was just the weirdest thing. I went over with a team, and then we booked the town square in front of City Hall to do my play on the streets. And usually they book a lot of venues in that downtown area, but there was a fluke and nothing got booked. The only game in town was my play. So thousands and thousands of people just flooded into the streets, and I did my play and with an interpreter, but the people really got it and they loved it. And at the end of it, it was like it was they get very excited there at the end. And what they do is they come up to the actor, and I didn't realize this. They come up and they pick you up and start to move you through the crowd. They physically pick you up. And so as I ended the play, took my bow, and then all of a sudden people start rushing towards me. I thought, oh no, what's going to happen? I thought I was about to be beat to death. But they picked me up, and then I remember this one gypsy just grabbed me, and just this toothless old guy. He looked like from Central Casting. He just starts kissing me on the head and goes, "I love Jesus, I love Jesus." So I'd say that was a high point. That's where it's like that could have been like, end my life here, roll the credits, man. This is a high. I love this moment. But I've done it at prisons, rehabs, huge venues, small venues, tiny churches in the middle of nowhere. I just did it. So, but yeah, I'd say Subotica. That was one of the most memorable.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? Before I let you go, I would love it if you would plug your YouTube again and any web pages or social media that you want to plug. Feel free to plug on here right now.
Okay. Yeah. Check Your Head Stories on YouTube. Check Your Head Stories on Spotify. It's the podcast. Also, checkyourheadstories.com is the website, and I'll be working on that in the next couple of days to get all the connections there. If you go to Check Your Head Stories and you watch one of the videos, if you go to the descriptions, all the links are at the bottom of that as well for all the other social media. Rumble, I'm still trying to figure out Rumble. It's on there, but I'm just getting started this week with that. Instagram at Check Your Head Stories. Let's see, Threads. Haven't posted much on Threads. I don't know if Threads is going to make it, but that have at Check Your Head Stories. And what are the other ones? Well, pretty much all of them that are major. I'm still exploring some of the smaller ones. But yeah, and then it'll be on Apple Podcasts probably next week or so. Check Your Head Stories. Yep.
Absolutely. Well, Michael, it was wonderful having you come on here, and this has been a fascinating interview. And a special shout out to Nancy McLaughlin for aiming my attention your way. This was fantastic. And I thank you for taking the time to come on here.
Well, Greg, I'm genuinely very glad to meet you. I think you're a really fascinating guy, and I'm in your heart. So I hope I get to know you more.
Oh yeah, well we're on Facebook, and you never know. I'll put you on the roster for next year, and I'll have you back on.
All right, Greg. Well,
Yeah, have
thank
you
you.
back on, see what the uh the updates are.
Yes, yes. We'll
Now,
see.
before I let you go, would you mind doing a plug for my show?
Oh, tell me what
Just
I
just
uh
state your name and say you're listening to Greg Gilbert on Python's Paradise.
This is Michael Sewell, and I'm listening to Greg Gilbert on Python's Paradise. Let me say it again. I think I messed up. This is Michael Sewell, and I'm listening to Greg Gilbert on Python's Paradise.
Absolutely, folks. And check your head. Check
Story,
your head, folks. Check your head
story, story,
stories.
story.
And yes, or check your head and red hot chili peppers, and then lead into check your head stories.
Yeah. All right, great, great
Michael,
meeting.
you enjoy that. You're in California, right?
Yes.
You
Yeah.
enjoy that nice warm weather, and know that you guys can't handle it here where we are. Can't handle it.
Again.
I rip Nancy about that all the time because I've heard the stories about people getting off the planes there in California wearing shorts and t-shirts, and then you guys automatically know, oh, it must be Canadians.
Well, I was just across the river from Toronto and Cleveland growing up, and then New York City. So I had I had plenty of them. So I know
There
what you
you
mean.
go.
All right,
There
Greg.
you go. Well, God bless you. Thank you so much. Keep the faith, man.
You man. God bless. Bye.
Bye bye.